For our top story today, we move to the Middle East, where according to the White House, Israel has accepted a new US-backed ceasefire proposal for Gaza. The plan, which was put forward by US President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, includes a 60-day truce. The proposed plan also includes the release of hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Hamas says it's reviewing the plan but claims the terms fall short. No guarantee of a permanent ceasefire, troop withdrawal or full aid access. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron warned that Europe may toughen its position against Israel if aid blockades continue. He said France could even consider sanctions if there's no humanitarian response soon. At the same time, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees says it has had enough aid to feed 200,000 people for a month, but supplies remain stuck just hours away from Gaza. According to reports, Gaza's last functioning hospital in the north has now shut down. Staff at the Al Awada hospital were forced to evacuate. Its director says there's now no one left to provide crucial medical care. We're now joined by our guest, Jordan Cope, who is a Middle East affairs expert located in Frankfurt, Germany. Thank you very much for joining us. Jordan, Israel has obviously put forward this 60-day truce, but there is no permanent ceasefire put forward. Is Israel serious about peace?
I think this question is incredibly misguided, if I may add. First and foremost, there are over 50 hostages still left in the Gaza Strip. This current ceasefire is overwhelmingly in favor of Hamas's demands. Israel is simply asking for 10 of its living hostages to be returned back, 18 of those who are deceased to be returned back to Israel, while Hamas, on the other hand, will be, for lack of a better term, freeing 1,111 prisoners, 125 of them who have life sentences and are some of the worst terrorists known to mankind. It's unbelievable that people would frame this as pro-Israel. Israel is simply trying to get its citizens back. That's what any country would do. And going back to some of the coverage initially, I would like to add that whatever President Macron might say right now, he's a hypocrite of the highest order. First and foremost, he's still in charge of colonies around the world, whether it be French Guiana over 5,000 miles away. And yet he claims that Israel doesn't have a right to protect its affairs on its immediate borders. He's a hypocrite of the highest order. He's an embarrassment to France. He previously argued for a need to respond better and to defend Israel after October 7th happened. He was exploring ways to deal with radicalism within his own borders. And then all of a sudden, once again, he's caved to the extremist demands. France, unfortunately, has a very disturbing future ahead. And despite his claims, Israel is allowing humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, even though it doesn't have to under international law, having known that previously Hamas has siphoned a lot of that aid. And the aid cooperation efforts between the United States and Israel right now have been received with quite a bit of success. Many people have been cheering in the streets their praises for Trump. These efforts have been coordinated with Israel. And also at the same time, every now and then, you do hear some pedestrians every now and then going off about Hamas and its persecuting role.
Jordan, Macron obviously isn't the only one to now speak to increase pressure on Israel. You've had a number of European nations, along with Canada now, voice their concern, particularly about the aid blockage and the obstructions that aid is facing in getting to the Gaza Strip. Obviously, you also have humanitarian agencies that have been voicing concerns for months. The UN humanitarian agency, the OCHA, says Gaza is the hungriest place on earth and 100% of people are at risk of famine. When we see these images of skeletal-looking children and constant misery of the Gaza Strip, do you not think it's a fair response for, critics would say, do you not think it's a fair response for people to raise their concerns, particularly obviously about the civilians in the Gaza Strip?
I'd like to raise, when it comes to these European countries, much of their leadership is part of this liberal to leftist world order aligned movement. And the unfortunate reality is it was this exact movement that radicalized the Gaza Strip that ultimately gave hundreds of millions of dollars of their own taxpayers' money towards UNRWA, which has produced more and more terrorists over time, which has caused extremism to proliferate throughout the Gaza Strip, for support for Hamas to proliferate, to justify the killing of innocent Jews, whether it be in the Gaza Strip or around the world. And so this international order has been part of the problem now for decades. They've literally invested in the conflict with their own taxpayers' money. Now, regarding the civilians and suffering of Palestinians, it's no doubt that in every war, civilians do suffer. As a matter of fact, according to the United Nations, 90% of all casualties in modern day urban warfare are actually those of civilians. The reality of the matter is that Israel has performed so impressively in terms of preserving civilian life that even with Hamas's numbers, it's estimated that it's about 50% combatant casualties to 50% civilian casualties. Every civilian casualty, of course, is a tragedy in and of its own right, but war is not something where the results are ultimately going to be something favorable. And so in regards to aid coming in and Palestinian suffering, the UN also, part of this international world order, claimed that 14,000 Palestinian children were to die within 2 days. And that official who made that statement was blatantly false. And one has to question whether the shooting of 2 Jews in Washington, D.C. within that same week was provoked by that misinformation, which continues to perpetuate throughout major media outlets.
Jordan, there's obviously many conflicting statements about the amount of civilian casualties in Gaza, so I just want to reiterate that to the audience. This peace deal is obviously diplomatically, how do you see Israel and Hamas moving forward? Obviously, we have a widespread humanitarian crisis in Gaza going on, and with both sides negotiating seems to not be going well, especially recently, especially since Israel has continued its offensive. There's only been one hostage released since Israel resumed its offensive, and that was facilitated by the United States. How do you assess Israel's new military offensive in getting these Israeli citizens that were kidnapped on October the 7th back?
The United States ultimately recognizes that Israel has 2 incentives in this war, which is why the current ceasefire proposal does not demand a permanent withdrawal from the Gaza Strip or a permanent cessation of Israel's military activities there. Those 2 goals ultimately being to free the remaining of the 50 hostages in Hamas captivity and to make sure that Hamas once again never has the ability to maintain power over the Gaza Strip. It's important now more than ever that Israel finishes off Hamas, because if Israel doesn't, Hamas has made clear that it plans on committing October 7th style attacks time and time again. And while many Hamas officials are claiming that Israel has caused a situation of starvation in the Gaza Strip, it's also important to note that Hamas doesn't really even believe this, because they're encouraging their citizens right now to not accept humanitarian aid from both Israel and the United States. So Hamas either wants all of their people to die, which is obviously not true because it knows that the humanitarian crisis is not as bad as it actually claims, nor the casualty statistics which it has put forth previously, which it has once again corrected, indicating that approximately 72% of all those casualties were actually of men who were aged in the age range of those who are traditionally fighters. So they know Israel's not targeting civilians. They know that there's not a famine. And so what Israel ultimately has to achieve are those 2 incentives. The United States recognizes the legitimacy of those demands. And the Western European countries right now should not continue to cave to extremism, which continues to infect themselves from within their own borders.
Okay, Jordan Cope, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We now move over to Europe, where Russia and Ukraine are expected to discuss ceasefire conditions next week in Istanbul, according to the